Hello, welcome to Conversations with a Wounded Healer. I'm your host, Sarah Bueno. Today, I would love to ask that if you are a fan of the podcast and you think that this has information worth listening to please share it with a friend. I'm so excited to share this podcast with the world, and it's very ironic that today I want to talk about overperforming and overachieving while at the same time I'm asking you to share this podcast because, I mean, this is part of the conundrum, right? Like our culture focuses so much on success and achievement, and it's really, really hard to function outside of that paradigm. And, you know, truly my motivation for asking you to share this is I do believe that the message and a lot of what I share on this podcast would be helpful for people. And so I want as many people to hear it as possible. And then, of course, there's the part of me that wants to get some sort of recognition out of this. And I can't pretend that that's not there. But at the same time, I believe, and I've done a lot of work around this, I believe that my main motivation is to really support people's spiritual, mental, and emotional growth. And I think that a lot of what happens on this podcast can do that. So let's get into overperforming and overachieving, shall we? This is something I'm coming face to face with this right now. I'm in a point where I've been struggling with adrenal fatigue for quite a while now, and I have less energy than I want to. I feel like I am not at my best. I'm not able to do as much as I am used to being able to do, and I have to say no a lot more. I just did a podcast interview on another podcast that I will advertise shortly as soon as that is ready and available. And she talked about this idea of having a bathtub and our different levels of energy and our sensitivities to our environment. Different people's bathtubs fill up, and some fill up quickly and some drain quickly. But somebody like me, my bathtub fills up really quickly and then drains really, really slowly. And I felt that was such a really great analogy for what it feels like I'm going through at this point. And I feel so blessed to have a lot of gifts that I'm able to utilize in the world. And as I've said before, I can manifest like a motherfucker. And sometimes it's much to my detriment because now I feel like I'm juggling so many things and I can't sustain it anymore. I just can't. I've come to kind of a threshold where I'm trying to make some really hard decisions about what I want my life to look like moving forward. And when I think about how did I get here, I kind of pull back and look at the bigger picture. And I've shared with everyone that I've been experiencing NARM therapy as a client, neuroaffective relational model. And one of the things that I've recognized is my desire for achievement is so much deeper than just this cognitive idea that I internalized based on my upbringing, but it truly feels life or death to me. It feels like if I am not achieving, then I'm worthless. It feels like survival. It feels like I have to do this in order to exist. Otherwise, I'll be annihilated. And I know that that sounds really dramatic, but I think it's important to say it that way, just to recognize, you know, we walk around every day with certain ideas about ourselves, and it's only part of what our belief structure is underneath, right? It's really, when we get down to the core of what our issues are, they're always dramatic and hysterical. And that's why they are so irrational. I have clients sometimes are like, well, you know, this feeling doesn't make sense. And I'm like, that's exactly why it's a feeling. It's not, if feelings were rational, we would all be like Dr. Spock, right? So I'm really trying to create space for this fear, right? This fear of if I do not perform to the highest level of my ability 100% of the time and constantly achieve, then I am nothing. I'm really trying to create space for that to breathe, not to like wallow in that feeling, but I feel like when we deny what our true feelings are, then we don't give them space and we try to kind of choke them out. You know, this is the thing with like positive affirmation, right? If I'm only telling myself positive things and I'm only thinking positively all the time, I'm just denying a real part of myself that needs a voice. So I'm trying to let this part kind of come forth right now and experience, and I'm going to use another dramatic word, but experience the agony of fearing this perceived annihilation that could happen. And I'm wondering, as I say this out loud, I wonder if this is an experience of ego death. I have not done any psychedelic drugs, but I've, heard people talk about them and talk about when somebody does a psychedelic like LSD or ayahuasca or something like that. Part of what happens is you come to the precipice of ego death, where the self as we know it essentially is annihilated, right? And I think that idea of ego death is a really important part of spiritual growth, because I believe I've said on the show before, I think that what we're trying to do as therapists is we need to build ego strength so that people can tolerate the day-to-day world, right? And then I think we get to a point where the ego has served us and we need to begin to let go of that so that we can create some sort of, I guess, spiritual ascension. And this might sound like super lofty, but I hope somebody out there is like, yes, that makes sense to me. And a lot of people I feel like are really, really struggling right now. We're in the most politically divisive time, certainly of my lifetime. And there's just so much coming to the surface right now. And the only way I'm getting through this is believing that there's a reason why we've come to this breaking point. And I know that all of the trials and tribulations and the difficulties in my life are here as teachers to help me evolve spiritually. And it's so hard to remember that when I'm in the struggle. And this is one of the reasons I love the podcast, and I love having space to really say these things out loud and hopefully say them out loud and have other people recognize, yes, I'm feeling that same way. So cheers to overachievers. I see you all, and I feel you so deeply. And I want to share with you that fear of not being good enough, and that the depth of that fear of just not even being if you're not overachieving. So you're not alone. We're in this together. So thanks for listening. Thanks as always to the Creative Imposter Studios for editing, to Liam O'Donnell for the album art, and to Ben Mueller for our theme music. As I said at the beginning, if you really like what we've got going on in the podcast, please share. You can also find us on Instagram at Head Heart Therapy. You can find us on the web at www.headhearttherapy.com/podcast, on Facebook at Head Heart Therapy and at Wounded Healer, and on Patreon as well. Just search for Conversations with a Wounded Healer. Thanks so much for joining me. Until next time, bye-bye.